As you become more and more familiar with the Tour Links putting green system, you will begin to realize there are very few installations that cannot be accomplished with Tour Links. The installation you are about to view takes place in a beautiful waterfront home on a second floor roof. The space was considered to be unusable for many years, but the creative design of one of the area's top landscapers converted an unattractive, useless space into a dream green overnight. In this installation, access to the roof was limited and required passing the panels up from the ground one at a time. This is one of the advantages of the lightweight panels. For this installation, the customer decided they wanted the putting green to have a 2-inch rise on one end. Using the Tour Links contour system that had been sealed with a latex elastomer made easy work of this request. Simply position the individual styrofoam sections into the proper location and secure them together with the pre-cut foam keys. This particular installation is utilizing both bump rail panels and center panels. The installation was started with the bump rail panels up against the existing railing. Continue to assemble the panels all the way across the roof. In this installation, we will be installing the panels over the entire roof, and it will be necessary to custom fit the last panels up against the wall. It is advisable to temporarily place your cup panels into their approximate location. Doing this now ensures that a cup panel will not be left out, causing a mistake in the plan. When fitting panels up against the wall or any other obstruction, it will be necessary to cut the panels to shape. Using a tape measure and straight edge, mark the panels to be cut and proceed to cut them with either a jigsaw or a circular saw. The techniques for cutting the panels are no different than the techniques used for cutting wood. Oftentimes, trying to fit a panel up against the wall can prove to be difficult. In this instance, saw off the bottom teeth and the matching top teeth. You can then just drop the panel straight into place and secure the panel with a few screws. When installing up against an obstacle, it is often advisable to leave a gap for expansion, which will also allow for the turf to be tucked in to create a nice finished look. Continue to assemble the panels, being sure to leave the proper gap between each panel. It is recommended that a minimum of a 1/16 of an inch or a maximum of an 1/8 of an inch be left between each panel. A rule of thumb is if the panels are cool to the touch during installation, leave an 1/8 of an inch gap. If the panels are hot to touch during installation, leave a 1/16 of an inch gap. By leaving this gap, you are allowing the panels to expand freely into the air gaps between the panels. This expansion and contraction is the key to the success of a modular panel system. When installing the ICC cup panel, be aware of the fact that the hole is not positioned in the exact center of the panel and can be spun into 4 different configurations. Make sure you are positioning the cup the way you want to see it in the finished installation. Continue installing the panels using the techniques that we've described in all the installations, pulling the panels towards you at a 45-degree angle. The panels should never be kicked or hammered into place, but installed by using the method shown. When going over a severe contour, oftentimes the panels will tend to bind. In this case, simply have a helper lift the adjoining panel up slightly, creating a more level installation plane. In this installation, it was necessary to cut the panels around the roof obstacles, such as vents and pipes. Use the same exact methods that were described when going up against a wall. Remember, this cutting does not need to be perfect. It's more of a rough cut style. Continue to check that the proper gap has been left between panels and begin to install 2 or 3 rows of fasteners around the outside perimeter. Use a self-tapping screw and washer and be sure not to over-tighten the fasteners. We want each panel to be able to expand and contract freely during temperature changes. You will sometimes find that when installing the panels over a severe contour, the teeth of one panel will slightly rise above the teeth of the adjoining panel. Although rare, this can be an issue, and there are a few ways to solve the problem. Firstly, have someone stand on the panels in the contour area and install a few extra screws into the panels where this uneven surface has developed. Second is to simply run a belt sander over the high teeth to bring everything back into the proper plane. This will not take very much effort and will guarantee a beautiful contour. Remember, the uneven teeth are rarely ever a problem, but if you have the tools, then take the time to do it right. A quick sweep of the panels and your installation is now ready for turf. The turf sat outside for a few days and was sprayed with water and allowed to dry. This pre-shrinking is a very important step to ensure a good installation. The turf was brought up to the roof and rough cut into the approximate position in preparation of seaming. There are several techniques that will create a good seam in nylon turf, and we will discuss them thoroughly in the section entitled Turf Seaming. In this particular installation, it was agreed that the seam would be created using the gutter and flashing tar tape. A seam can be created using either a straight seam method or a serpentine cut. Once the seam has been completed, the shape of the turf can be cut according to the design. Draw the design on the turf using chalk. This is an easy way to mark the line to be cut. Using a carpet installer's seam cutter makes easy work of this. Once the putting turf has been cut, trace around the turf onto the panels so that you have an exact reference point as to where to replace the turf during the final installation steps. The next step is to cut the fringe by placing the already cut putting turf on top of the soon-to-be-cut fringe. Make sure that you have left plenty of fringe to be either used up against the bump rails or tucked in place along the house. By slipping the fringe under the putting turf and using the putting turf to guide the cutting tool, you will accomplish a perfect fit. There are several schools of thought as to what direction the grain of the fringe should be running. In this particular installation, we have the grain of the fringe running towards the putting turf in an effort to have the seam disguised by the turf fibers. Although this is not how turf would grow in nature, it typically gives a better looking installation. A bit of experience and you will be able to determine exactly how you want the grain to run, either all in one direction or in towards the seams. It is truly a personal preference. Now that the putting turf has been cut to match the fringe turf, it is now time to do the final cuts along the bump rails and around the wall or any obstacles. These cuts can be made by either using a razor blade knife or any other carpet cutting tool. Had there been space between the bump rail panels and the outside railing, using the Torling's carpet cutting tool would have been a great option due to the fact that this tool accurately cuts the turf up against the bump rails. But in this case, space was limited, so it had to be cut by hand. It is now time to begin the seaming of the putting turf to the fringe. Using the gutter and flashing tape makes easy work of this seaming. Simply pull the turf back and roll a section of the pre-placed fringe onto itself. Cut off a piece of the gutter tape about 24 inches long and place it under the putting turf. Now unroll the fringe, being certain that the fibers from the fringe turf are right up against the fibers of the putting turf. It is very important to get the fibers of both turfs to fit nicely against each other. Continue to do this method all the way around the perimeter of the green, securing the putting green to the fringe. Use the same exact technique for seaming one piece of fringe to the other. Typically, we elect to perform all the seaming prior to cutting the cups to guarantee perfect fit. But in this installation, due to the intricate fitting around windows and walls, we elected to cut the cups first and then seam the turf. Both methods work fine. Using a sharp, retractable razor blade knife, find the cup location with your hand and carefully plunge the razor blade knife through the turf and slowly up against the aluminum guide. Guide the razor blade knife around the inside circumference of this template. By using the template, you have guaranteed that the floating cup is in the exact center of the panel. The Torling's cups are designed to orbit in a 360-degree direction, which allows the cups to always be placed perfectly in relationship to the turf. Continue to do this with all the cups, being careful not to move the turf. Once all the cups have been cut, go back and install the filler plates and cups into their proper location. Be sure to twist the cups into place and position the deck washers over the cups and secure them in place with the double-sided tape. This little extra step with the deck washers will help prevent any sagging of the turf around the cup. Once the turf has been all cut and you are comfortable with the position of the turf and the centering of the cups, begin to gently stretch the turf in all directions using a carpet kicker. The reason for this step is to ensure that the turf is pulled tight in all directions and anchored to the outside perimeter in an effort to minimize future wrinkles. As the turf is being stretched in every direction, a small stainless steel screw or small galvanized tack can be used to hold the turf down into position. Simply screw or nail the fasteners through the turf and directly into the panels. Double-sided tape along the outside edge of the panels can assist in this stretching. Tuck the turf into the gap that was left between the wall and the panels. By doing so, this creates a very neat finished installation. The techniques described of pre-shrinking the turf and stretching the turf to the outermost edges of the panels have proved to be very effective in preventing wrinkles that oftentimes happen with putting turf. These steps are particularly important on greens that are over 24 feet in length or width. Once all the turf has been secured to the outermost portion of the panels, an optional step of depositing a pound or 1.5 pounds of fill to the entire area can begin. Use a drop spreader to spread the proper amount of sand over the turf. Broom the sand into the fibers of the turf until an even layer has been achieved. This step will add ballast to the entire putting surface, helping to prevent any wind movement or wrinkling in the turf. Although we realize this step is not always obtainable, for greens larger than 24 feet in length, we believe it's a great option. This once useless space has now been transformed into a great family recreation spot for golfers of all ages. This particular installation was refused by several major putting green companies and was not a reality until Tour Links was recruited for the job.